Hey everyone, welcome. Stephen, how's it going?
Good. I'm excited to be back. I know it's been a while since we've done some live videos.
I know it's been an entire year. We did this last summer. For those of you who joined us before then, thank you for coming back again. But this is the second time Stephen and I have, come up with this idea along with Danny and Mandy from the foundation to be like, let's do a summer video series. Let's stay connected. Let's make sure that even though the podcast, those guys are taking a break, we're stepping up and filling in those shoes. So, thank you all for joining us tonight. We're going to be doing a series of webinars every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. For how many weeks, Stephen? 10? Is that what we committed to?
10 weeks. Yep.
10 weeks. All right. So, each
So
week.
it could be a little bit different this year. Last year, we were really focused on educators. This year, we're going to kind of mix it up a little bit. We decided that we're going to kind of widen the aperture just a little bit and include like a real wide smattering of topics. I'm excited about this summer.
I now know what the word aperture means because we did a photography thing last year. That has been one of my learning moments in the past year. All right. So you can use the comments feature on whatever platform you're listening to us on, whether that is LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. The comments will come up on our end. We should be able to answer those for you. But tonight we're just going to talk about, let's get back to basics, the 10 steps to better finances. And this is based off of the 10-step blueprint to financial independence that ChooseFI has put out. Steve, we can find that on the ChooseFI Foundation website and on the FI 101 website, correct?
That's correct. There's a really easy link, just ChooseFI.com/FI101. You see down there below the link. It's a completely free course that the foundation built. It's focused on adult education. The foundation as a whole tackles kind of both the pre-K through 12 as well as the adult education. So this is a self-paced adult education course that a little over 14,000 people have taken total. So it's exciting. It's about 12 lessons. Each one's 10, 15 minutes worth of video and a little bit of reading. It's really easy. You've got a bunch of worksheets, and it just goes to the basics. It assumes like, hey, nobody taught us this in school. Nobody taught us this in college. I always really enjoy the meme on April 15th. That's like, oh, it's algebra day. Oh no, it's tax day. Nobody taught me that.
Hey now. Don't be throwing shade at the math teachers.
but it just kind of, it's very unassuming of a course. So anybody can jump in there and learn something. We've had some really amazing feedback of literally people changing their life based on the information that's in there. And it's not because the information is so special, right? Like it's just the basics of doing a little bit, getting 1% better every day, but it's also this whole community of people that are doing it, right? So it's really encouraging to make you want to get up and take charge and make some changes. So.
And that may be you tonight. You're like, oh, you know what? I finally found this moment where I have some space and I want to learn about doing better with my money. And I'm like, oh, there's a live webinar. Let me tune into that tonight and learn some more. Or you could be like, yeah, I've got a pretty good grip of my finances. I'm interested in the conversation, but I know friends, I know people who really are struggling with their finances or who are ready to get started and they don't know where to start. Maybe they're not big readers. Maybe they're not really into listening to podcasts, but this is something that they can get on board with, a self-paced on-demand course that they can just get sent to their email inbox, do it as it comes in, take part in the community if they want to. I encourage you to do that. The community is a great place to be and get those basics of personal finance under their belts. All right. So before we really get any deeper into this, we probably should reintroduce ourselves because a lot of people probably don't know who we are. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. So I'm Stephen Hemptig. I'm actually an active duty Air Force guy out of Philadelphia. I got involved with the ChooseFI Foundation a few years ago. I helped write some of their kind of military, civil servant material, as well as some of the adult education for personal finance.
Awesome. And my name's Rob Phelan. I work for ChooseFI Foundation. So this is the nonprofit branch of ChooseFI. I'm part of the curriculum writing team. So we produced a pre-K through 12th grade personal finance curriculum that had a financial independence lens on it as well. And this is something that's freely available to all teachers, all homeschool parents. Basically, if you're like at home and you're like, I want to do something with my kids or even for myself, there's tons of stuff there for you. We scripted lessons for someone who has no idea what they're talking about and they want to learn alongside helping other people. And then if you are an experienced educator, you know a lot about personal finance already. We've assembled the resources, the tools, the lesson plans, the unit guide, whatever you really need to make this happen in your classroom. And you can find that at choosefi.org/pre-K12. All
So
right.
it's totally possible that because we are getting smarter. We are old dogs that can learn a few new tricks, and so we have got this out on LinkedIn and YouTube and a few other places that are new. So it's possible that people may have not even encountered ChooseFI at all. So the ChooseFI Foundation is a foundation arm, a nonprofit arm of a podcast called ChooseFI, Choose Financial Independence. And so it's two guys who started a podcast, and there's kind of a growing, pretty expansive network across the world. I think 152 major cities or something have local groups. And so just if this is the first time you've ever come across ChooseFI, just really implore you, check it out. Any podcast player, you can find it. Just ChooseFI podcast and pull it up, give it a listen, check it out.
Yeah, and as Stephen mentioned, there is a series of local groups. There are, do you know how many local groups we have at this point?
No, as I said, I think we cover 152 cities around the whole world, and there's a bunch of like topic ones as well. It's there's a lot. Basically, every major city around most of the United States and central parts of Europe have a local group.
Yeah, and if you're looking for other like-minded people like you in your area, the groups have been pretty quiet over the past year for obvious reasons, but they are starting to pick up again, and meetups are starting to happen. You'll also just find a group of people in your area who are thinking the same as you. So if you have like a question about, how do I hack XYZ cost in this area, you're probably going to get much better information from that group than you might from a main group. So yeah, check it out, choosefi.com/local, and you can see where is the closest group to you. I know I live in Maryland. There's one in Frederick. There's one in Baltimore. There's one in DC. And there is one in Columbia, Maryland, I think, as well. I'm not sure how active that group still is, but lots of choice for me. So there's actually one in my hometown and then two within a very short driving distance. But we are going to talk tonight about the 10 steps to better finances. And just to preface this, I'm going to speak for myself and probably Stephen as well. We are not certified financial planners. We are not like self-obsessed financial experts. Like, we know a lot, mostly from what we've learned from talking to others who are smarter than us about these things. And we will do our best to answer your questions, but there may be some questions that we don't know the answer to, and we will try and find an answer and come back to you next week with that. So, feel welcome to ask your questions, but just know I'll get around to answering all of them. Particularly tonight. Tonight is going to be about 10 steps to better finances. So we're going to try and stay on the low order, beginner questions for the most part. And then if we have time at the end, we'll do Q&A and dig into some of those other questions as well. But let's start at the first step. What is step number 1 to doing better with our finances? So step number 1 is track every dollar you spend for 90 days. So you're just getting started on this journey. Like, you've never really thought about your finances before. The first step is to figure out where you've actually been already, or what you're currently doing with your money. So like, Stephen, how would you do this?
Yeah, so there's several ways to do this. And I'll say, just to piggyback on what Rob said, like if you listen to almost any personal finance podcast, you read a book, like this is the step that people almost always say, like this is both the easiest and the hardest step, right? Like, it's easy. It doesn't cost you any money. It doesn't take all that much effort. It really just takes a pen, paper, and a little bit of time. It also is typically the step where like you're making a choice to do something different, right? So it's getting that mental game. Finances is really not that much math. It's actually a lot of the mental game, behavior, just making that choice. Hey, like it's time for us to do something different to get different results. So the way that you can do this is, like I said, good old-fashioned pen and paper. What you want to end this exercise with is exactly how much money is coming in to my life every month and how much money is leaving my life every month, right? It's a really simple equation. And so you can pull out your bank statements, you pull out your credit card statements, you pull out everywhere where you're spending money, everywhere where you're making money, your paychecks, your pay stubs, your side hustles, and you write it down. So in today's world, right, like typically people will choose to do that on an Excel document or Google Sheets. You also can get a little bit fancier. So you have options like Mint, where you can connect your bank accounts, and that way it does it a little bit automated. I am a huge fan of YNAB, right? YNAB. And it stands for You Need a Budget. And it is a company that is all about saying, like, you need a budget. You just need to track your spending. You need to track what is coming in and what is going out. Because at the end of the day, you can't save any money if you're spending more than you make. Like, really, that's what this leads to, is understanding what situation you're in. And so this is kind of similar to the old adage of, right, like, stepping on the scale is something that we all hate to do. But the first step to losing weight is stepping on the scale and figuring out where you're at, right? And so this is that uncomfortable step of, hey, like, we're just going to, no judgment, no shame, no stress is supposed to be involved in this, right? Like, this is just the facts of life today. Where do we stand? What is coming in every month? What's going out? And then taking a look at that picture and saying, do I have any money left over at the end of the month? Or am I spending more than what's coming in, right? Like, am I digging this hole deeper?
Yeah. And I just put a link in the chat for all of you as well, or in the comment section. This is our ChooseFI Foundation cash flow tracker. This goes with our passport to financial independence. So it's really part of the foundation curriculum. And it's something I do use with my students every single time I teach a personal finance class. And it's exactly what Steven said. It's a printable sheet, or you can treat it as like a editable PDF. You can do a Google Sheet if you want. I can put the link for that in later. But this essentially is just going to be a spreadsheet that has 31 days, place to put in your income, and then it has categories for expenses. And these are just kind of like generic categories. You can create your own version of this very easily. And you just, every day, if you spend money, let me log it. And what I encourage my students to do is keep it in their pockets, in their wallet, in their bag, in their car, like wherever they kind of frequent after they spent money. Some keep it on their bedside table, and just at the end of the night before you go to bed, fill it in, like, what did I spend money on today? And you just want that complete picture of, where is my money actually going? And side consequences, you probably will spend less money the month that you start tracking it, because as soon as you're aware of what you're doing, you stop. Like, you start kind of tightening it up a little bit. You can also look backwards. So if you spend all of your money on credit cards or on debit cards, you can look at your bank statement. So you can see, like, what money came in via my income, and then where did my money go? Credit card statements, like what was each of the outflows. Am I missing anything?
Now, there's a lot of reasons that you can come up with not to do this, right? Or a lot of hurdles that you can put in front of yourself to make this seem more difficult. So, it says on there 90 days. If 90 days is a lot, do 30 days. 90 days, we think, gives you a good picture, because one term that I know we stole from YNAB and their CEO is life is lumpy, right? Like, your expenses are not the same every month. And so 90 days is 1/4 of the year. If I'm doing that public math correctly, I'm not a math teacher. And so it gives you, a decent slice of what you're spending for a decent amount of time without going through too much trouble. But if that's too much, do 30 days, right? Do not let any of the small things be another reason not to do it. Something else too, right? Like, last month, let's say you had a big expense. Let's say that, you took a nail to a tire in your car. And so you had an extra $200-300 expense, right? And you're like, that month is different, right? I'll wait till next month. No, like, just do it now. Put it on there and add a category for one-time expenses or non-regular expenses, right? Like, just put a category on that says, like, I might have to do this every few years. Or, if you're watching this replay in January, everybody knows that December is more expensive because of Christmas, right? Those kinds of things. That's okay. Just put it all down on paper and then look at it and start to say, like, okay, what do I think is normal for a month for me? But then again, like,
or you want to talk expensive, how about when the economy opens up? Like, my budget has just been shot over the past month. Now that we're actually able to go out and do things.
Yeah.
Like, I got so comfortable with, like, the past year. It's like, oh, we don't really spend that much money. This is really easy to save and invest and all that stuff. And now when we can start doing things again, it's like, oh, no, we gotta do this again. We gotta track and budget and reset.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's get into step number 2. So step number 2, you've already figured out, okay, here's where my money's going. I've tracked it for 90 days, or I've gone back in time 90 days or 30 days or whatever you chose to do. Try and do at least 30, by the way. 7, 14, 21, it's not enough time to really get a good picture of your spending. A month is at least the the average person will budget on a month because you get paid either monthly or twice a month or biweekly. It's enough time to really get a couple of paychecks in and then allocate it. But if you do not have one already, the next step is to build a $1,000 crisis fund. And this is not an emergency fund in the traditional sense. This is a crisis fund. Stephen, what's the difference?
Yeah, and this comes like we freely admit that like this comes from some of the people in the personal finance space that came before us, right? They recognize the fact, and we think that this is very true, that having $1,000 in the bank changes your life. If you have never had $1,000 in the bank, that's savings before, right? I know that the statistics are out there that most of the people in America can't cover a $400 surprise expense in a month. This takes you off of that ledge where you decide today, okay, we're going to do something differently. We're going to track our spending. We're going to pay attention to what we're spending. And then next month, all of a sudden, the starter in your car goes out. You're a one-car family and you need that car to go to work, right? Like you're going to fix it. That's all. It's what it comes down to. And we recognize that. We know like that hand that you were dealt in life, you're going to fix it. You're going to put it on the credit card. You're going to move on with life, and then you're going to deal with it. And so having $1,000 in the bank is a way to take you and your family and those that you take care of off of that cliff's edge of anything that comes up is an emergency and a crisis because I don't have the ability to deal with it, right? And then the interesting thing is once you do that, you tend to notice, and Rob, chime in here if you see this as well, you tend to notice that like not so many emergencies come up anymore, right? Like it's just a thing that happens. It's just if I get a nail in the tire and it's $200, but I got $1,000 in the bank, like it's a less than fun day. But at the end of the day, like you get your tire changed, and then you replace that $200 next month, and you go on about your life. It's not a crisis.
And it saves us from having to go into debt when a crisis happens. And the stat Stephen was referring to about most Americans not being able to cover a $400 expense, that came from, I think, an S&P 500 study. And it was basically 51% of people said if a $400 expense came up, they would go to cash savings or a credit card. But if you take the credit card out, it's actually way less than half of Americans could cover an emergency from their own savings without having to borrow for it. So if you're in financial straits and you need to like get control of your money, the first thing is to stop going back into debt. And the way to do that is to build your own emergency fund, your own crisis fund. Will $1,000 cover every single crisis that pops up? Absolutely not. Like you total your car and you need to replace a car right now, especially in today's market, $1,000 is probably not going to do it for you. But it might allow you to get into the crappiest car you can imagine that would actually run for at least a month to allow you to build up more cash to go buy that car later without having to go into debt for it. And that's a very extreme example. That's probably still pushing our limits a little bit, but most crises that come up will probably be covered by $1,000 or make it $1,500 if you feel like I need a little bit more.
This is the step that we get the most feedback on in FI 101. People that say, I've never had $1,000 in the bank. And, it takes some work to get there, right? So go around your house, figure out what you can sell on Facebook Marketplace, figure out how you can make, work an extra few hours this month, right? And every single dollar until you get $1,000, every single extra dollar, right? You stack it away. I don't care if you put this in a coffee can, in the fridge, in the freezer. I don't care, if you put it underneath your pillow. Once you get it though, put it somewhere safe. Put it somewhere that is not in your normal checking account. This $1,000 doesn't go in your normal spending, right? Because it'll get spent. That's how my life works. I will freely admit to that. I have a bank that is just for my spending because whatever's in there, I will spend it.
It does not go in your cryptocurrency coin wallet either.
Right. Right.
This is not invested money. This is not something that you're trying to get an interest rate on. You can put it in a high yield savings account if you would like. Just make sure that you can access that money pretty quickly. So within 3 to 5 business days, if you have something like a credit card that it can sit on during that time. But if the goal is to cut up credit cards and avoid them because we've abused them in the past and you just need to have that money accessible, it probably should either be a little bit in cash. So maybe $100 in cash, $900 in the bank, or it's in your local bank that you can walk into or go to an ATM and withdraw from at any point. So just make sure it's very accessible. The idea is to avoid going into debt and avoid having a crisis. All right, let's go into the next one. So we kind of talked about this already. Commit to
Yeah.
no debt. So kind of 2 and 3 pretty much go together. You've looked at your finances in step 1. You're like, gotta cut down on some spending here, particularly on the debt side, because I want to start paying it off. I want to get rid of it. Because if you buy something on credit, so you buy it on a credit card or through financing, you're going to pay more than the cost of that item by the time you've paid it back. And I don't know if you've noticed this, Stephen, but there's just this whole new type of financing popping up recently. And this is the buy now, pay later. I'm seeing
Yeah.
it everywhere, that a
Yep.
lot of major retailers and brands are offering this, like, oh, you can have it now and just give us like 4 payments of $50, over the next 4 months or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's wonderful. How nice of you. And the terms are great until you mess up. And the moment you mess up, the moment you forget, you're late, you don't have the money that month, they hammer you with interest. It goes back up to the full amount that was borrowed initially, plus a ton of interest. And that's what really gets people. And that's how the system works. It's like we will bank on enough people having lumpy lives that they will default on this at some point, and we will make a lot of money from doing this. So yeah, be aware of that if you're committing to a journey of doing better with your finances, the first step is to plug the holes in your boat, and that's usually your debt.
Yeah. We at ChooseFI, those that have been around ChooseFI a little bit, recognize that we're not anti-credit card, right? That's not necessarily. We try not to have any dogmas at ChooseFI, but we're definitely not specifically anti-credit card. There are some uses for them, but in every case, in every place where we talk about using credit cards for some specific reason, whether it's travel rewards or something else like that, it is always prefaced with you have to pay off all of your debt in full every month, right? And that takes, for a lot of us, myself included, that takes a lot of work to even get to that place, right? To get back to zero. And so most Americans are starting from a place of having credit cards. And so what we're really talking about here is we're talking consumer debt, right? We're talking about the couch that you financed at Sears, the money that you have on credit cards, right? The stuff that, like Rob was talking about, at the major grocery stores or major stores that you put on credit. Here, we're not necessarily talking about like home debt or student debt. In some cases, like car debt, I recognize that, like, you got to have a car to get to work, that kind of thing. This is, just to put it really simply, like, stop digging the hole deeper. Right? Like, you've got to stop digging the hole deeper. And so
we're not even getting rid of it yet. We're just saying we're stopping.
Yeah. So stop putting money. If you don't have the cash to pay for it, stop putting it, don't buy it. If you need to put it on credit, can you do without it? Can you figure out another way? Can you get creative? Can you work through a buy nothing group? Can you figure out some other way? Stop putting it on credit cards. Stop adding to your debt.
I had the same thought,
yeah.
Yeah, are you showing your age
wasn't
there?
Sears? No, wasn't Sears? Sears was the first retailer to come up with the modern credit card, right?
I thought it was the Diners Club.
I may have been. Maybe that was the first major store, the Sears card. I thought I was getting clever with my history there.
But yeah, it's like the point is valid though, and we're going to recognize as well that that's a very easy thing to say, and it's a much harder thing to do in practice. If you have grown into a lifestyle where everything is kind of going through credit cards, you're kind of just keeping it under maxed out, like maybe making minimum payments, the chances are that your lifestyle is currently costing more than you make, and you're using credit to bridge the gap. You are going to have to try and make tough decisions. And the two tough decisions are, what can I cut? And then, can I make more? So can I increase my income temporarily? Like we've referred to other personal finance personalities. Dave Ramsey is the one that comes to mind here, where he's like, when you're broke, there's only one place to go, and that's to work. And it kind of does make sense a little bit. It's a little general to say that everybody has the ability to do that, but you got to do one of the two things: either increase the amount coming in or decrease the amount going out, so that you can commit to stopping using debt. But yeah, definitely every person's scenario will be different. Personal finance is personal. You're going to have to find your way of doing that.
That's why we started this whole thing. That's why step one is not stop using debt. Step one is figure out what are you spending? Where is your money going, right? Like I have yet to talk to a person who said that, and I'm talking anybody. Even Brad and I, for example, ran through this exercise recently with a group of people, and Brad and I both found things that we were spending in a 30-day period that we didn't even realize we were spending it on, right? Like automated payments, especially subscription payments, are things that like are meant to make you forget about them. And so the point is go through step one. There's a reason they're in this order, because you'll find things that you didn't even know you were spending money on, and you'll be able to cut things that won't even hurt. You won't even feel it.
It's so true. For those of you that are just joining us, we're about halfway through the hour. My name is Rob Phelan. I'm with ChooseFI Foundation, and to this side is Stephen Hepdig, who's also with ChooseFI Foundation and also works with ChooseFI as well. We are going through the 10 steps to better finances, and I think we're about to go to step 4. So based on our current rate, we need to step this up a little bit.
We do.
All right. Step 4, ask, does your employer match retirement savings? Like why are we talking about retirement right now? We've just talked about tracking finances. We've talked about a crisis fund, stopping debt. Why suddenly are we transitioning to retirement? It seems like there's still a fire to put out somewhere.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a shift, right? Like something has happened here between steps 3 and 4. So you have figured out how much you're spending. You figured out how to stop spending more than you're making every month. And so the goal is you have a little bit of money now that you can put somewhere, a little bit of savings. You've got $1,000 in the bank, right? So in investing, we like to use 7-8% or so in terms of like is a reasonable 50-year average plus for the stock market in terms of investing for your retirement. Higher, much higher returns would be 15-20%, right? People would probably investment people would probably murder for the range of like 50 plus. Well, the beautiful thing is a lot of us that have W-2 income and have an employer savings program, they will match the money that we put in, right? And so if I put $1 in savings and my employer says, hey, we'll match every dollar you put in for the first whatever, the first $1,000, the first 2%, 3%, whatever. Every dollar that I put in there that my employer now matches is 100% return, right? Like you just got 100% on your money back. And so that's one reason why this is so key. The second reason this is so key is a lot of times that money is pre-tax. You can either do this with traditional pre-tax or Roth post-tax. Either of them have tax benefits. One of them has tax benefits going in, and the other one has tax benefits coming out the other end when you finally have to remove the money. So you are getting a high return on your money by simply using your employer's retirement savings plan, as well as getting some tax benefits on that.
Essentially, this is free money. We don't get free money very often. Very few things in life are free. This is free money. You are working for your employer. This is part of your compensation. Like it's part of your overall like pay for this company. And if you are not putting money into the retirement account, at least to get the full match. So what we mean is that if your employer says, we will match whatever you put in up to 5% of your salary, up to $2,000, whatever that is, we want to try and capture the free money. So we're not talking about putting a full $18,000 into your 401k right now. That's not this step. This step is just, let's make sure we're getting all the money that our employer is offering us. The hard part is that it does mean you need to divert some of your income into your 401k to actually get this. So it's like, you got to give some money to get the free money. But this is that step that comes next after we started taking control of our finances. We put out the fire. So we've got the crisis fund. We've stopped digging deeper into debt. And before we even start tackling the debt, we're just saying, let's capture the extra free money so that at least retirement is building a little bit in the background. And then the rest of our cash flow is going to go towards these other goals that we're going to have that are coming up next. So yeah, your employer, if it has a 401k, a TSP, a 403b, very few of us teachers will have any sort of employer match or public servants. But if you are in the private sector and you don't have a pension, the chances are you probably have a 401k that has a match. And sometimes it goes into HSA accounts as well. I've seen that employers will match into a health savings account too. But let's go into the next step. Turn you off and you on. Okay. This sounds really easy. I like this one. Forever pay off all debt. We made this one an easy step. And what we're kind of getting to now is the steps stop becoming linear. Now we start getting steps that you are kind of tackling at the same time. Would that be fair to say, Stephen?
Absolutely. Yep.
So forever pay off all debt. And we've got accept house and student loans under 5%. Reason we say 5%, and some people will say 6, some people will say 4, is that, as Stephen said earlier, the expected return we would get in the stock market for any given year, if you're talking about the total US stock market, is about 7, 8, 9, 10%, somewhere in there. So if your debt has an interest rate of 5%, that means it's growing in debt. The debt is growing also, but at a rate of 5%. If you are investing the money instead of paying down debt, your money will grow. Your net worth will increase by more by actually investing your money instead of paying off that debt. Versus the consumer debt, which is at maybe a credit card, which is in the 20s potentially. You might have private student loans that are above 6%. You might have some medical bills. You might have some like store credit cards. I'm trying to think of some other ones, payday loans for sure. Any of that kind of like peer-to-peer lending that might have a very high interest rate. If it's over 5, 6%, that's debt that's got to go now, because that is hurting your net worth more than you could probably build it up by investing. And you can look back with hindsight and say, oh, well, if I had thrown all my money in Dogecoin, this wouldn't be an issue. I would have 20x'd my money and I would have just paid off all my debt with that. If you're getting that kind of return, it's very unlikely you can ever guarantee that that's going to happen. So what we would say is let's pay off the things with the tried and true methods that we know make sense based on the average returns over longer periods of time. So yeah, that 5% mark is kind of your line in the sand.
Yeah.
List your debts and that interest rate.
This is a step that is it's acknowledging the current state of our generation, right? Like a lot of our generation that's in the workforce right now, they came out with student loans, and those student loans could have been very significant, and they have legitimate incomes to pay for those student loans, but some of the other, personal finance suggestions out there say, hey, pay off all of your debt before you start investing. So this is an acknowledgement that we, like Rob said, we want to start doing some of these steps in the second half, the 5 through 10, right? These are meant to be done together. These are meant to be rules of thumb that you can take and tweak to your situation. So an interesting thing, when we wrote FI 101, federal student loan rates were at 4.75. So the 5% is there for multiple reasons, right? To Rob's point, it's very close to that 6, 7, 8. And so if you start to get a guaranteed return of above 5%, then that's something that you want to take. And paying off student loans at that interest rate is a guaranteed return. And then as well as, like I said, the federal student loan rate at the time was just underneath that. And it was kind of acknowledging that there's a lot of people that have student loans out there, and we're going to tackle those at the same time as we're investing. I think, Rob, this is a really important time. Let's take a quick break, and let's talk about the concept that I know it was hard for me to grasp at the time. Is it, the concept that it's the same thing, you are actually getting the same effect of your net worth. And when I say net worth, right, I mean, like, what are you worth? What is all of your assets, the things that you own and are worth money, minus all of your debts? So like your total number that comes out at the end of that, what do I own and what do I owe? The idea that, credit cards, paying off credit cards is actually the same as investing. I know that it's not intuitive.
No. And your net worth is not your personal worth. Just to preface that, like, it is certainly what you own minus what you owe. And you get this number of like, okay, this is what, if I liquidated everything, if I sold everything I had and took that cash, paid off the debts, what will be left? And that's how you get your net worth number. And you can choose to include your home in that or not. Some people do, some people don't. It is totally personal preference. We'll probably talk about that in a future webinar at some point. But yeah, this idea that paying off debt is a net worth builder. You have the the actual value you're chipping towards the debt. So like whatever you throw at your debt is going to decrease the amount you owe. So by default, your net worth goes up because you're subtracting less money. But there's also the hidden savings that you don't see. And that's, if I hadn't made that payment, what would my debt have increased by when you apply that interest as well? So it's a twofold kind of thing. Like you're decreasing the overall debt, the number that you see, but you're also removing all of that future interest that would have accrued against you had you decided not to pay that off. So that's what we talk about. Like if you're locking in an interest rate over 6% or over 10% because you're paying down a 20% credit card, you are really doing a great service to your net worth. You are locking in a 20% interest rate towards your net worth. So it's not going to look great in terms of like, you're not going to see your investment account skyrocketing, but you're going to see that debt number come down. And every time it's going to come down faster because less interest gets applied each time you do that. And then you hit zero at some magical time. That's a big moment for a lot of people where you hit a net worth of zero. And then it really gets excited when you start seeing that number go up into the positives.
Yeah, I think this might be one of the most critical pieces of this whole, blueprint to FI, getting a tackle on your personal finances, is understanding, the adage of whoever said it, whether it's Einstein or somebody else, interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest is. And so in the same way that compound interest works for us in retirement, it also works against us in debt. And it's exactly the same. So if you put $1 in and you get 10% interest on your investments, that is the exact same as taking that dollar and paying off $1 of debt that is at 10% interest. And so what that means is, if your choice is I can put $100 into my investments at that, like I said, we're averaging 7-8%, or I can pay off a very standard 26% interest credit card, you actually want to pay off that credit card. That does you better in the long run. And so that's why this step is here. It's why these steps are thought out the way they are. It's why we see the pay off debt come before we see the start piling money, aggressively into investments. We want to capture that 100% match. We want to capture whatever the match is, right? Because that could be up to 100% interest. And so that's way up front. But then comes, hey, we got to get rid of that 20, 15, 10, 7% interest debt before we start moving on to capturing that interest for our retirement.
And that $100 example is the perfect one. So if you have $100 and you have a choice, I either pay down a debt or I invest it. If you invested it and you got 10% return, you would make $10. So you would add $10 to your net worth. If you didn't pay down that debt, so you had a $100 debt and it was at 25% interest, it would grow by 25. So you would now have another negative 25 on your net worth. So you would have added 10, but subtracted 25, you actually fell further behind. Yeah. Versus the other way around, you said, okay, I'm going to pay down that debt. So I save myself that $25 of interest. And I also knocked $100 off my debt. I didn't get the 10% investing, but I knocked 25 off instead of going negative 15. So it's a big number shift when you start attacking it that way. All right, let's move into, what are we on? Step 6? I think so.
Yeah.
So again, this is kind of going alongside step 5. So we're tackling debt. We're also turning that crisis fund into an emergency fund. So why 3 to 6 months? Is there any logic behind that?
Yeah, it's essentially saying that likely, and this is 3 to 6 months of your living expenses, right? Like for me, and I think this might be one of the most personal pieces of all of these instructions. Like you have to decide what is important for you in terms of your time frame and your safety and your risk tolerance. When I say risk tolerance, I don't mean fancy, terms of investing risk tolerance. I mean just literally, how risky is your job, right? Like I'm a government employee, and so for a long, long time that was considered like the most stable of paychecks. We're going to get a paycheck every time. Realistically now, right? Like I would tell people who are younger than me different than what people told me, which is we have seen government shutdowns. We have seen government paychecks not go out, right? Versus, so I have 3 to 6 months worth of my critical living expenses, like my bills, feeding my family, putting gas in my car, that kind of money. if you are working at a seasonal job, or you're working, you're some type of sales consultant or something that's essentially per diem, right? Like my wife is not a W-2 employee. She works only based on how much free time is off at her job, right? So if she were living on her own, I would suggest to her, like, have a much higher emergency fund than somebody that's normal, because you don't know what your next year might look like. So this really takes a little bit of introspection and saying, what is the risk of my job and not having a paycheck come in look like? What's the likelihood of that? What's the possibility? And then how long do I want to be able to survive without having any income? And so typically, 3 to 6 months will typically get you through a no work period, whether you get injured or you get laid off from your job. In June
Furloughed.
furloughed, I was gonna say in June of 2021, I'm not sure that we have to lay out the reasons why we might all not have income coming in. This is one of the wildest years. And I think a lot of people are probably looking back and saying, hey, this is something that I think would be valuable for my family to take care of.
And I like that you said it was like your critical core expenses, because I think a lot of people look at 3 to 6 months of expenses and they're like, oh man, I looked at my 90 days, what I spent, and I have to save 6 times that for 6 months of expenses. No, it's core expenses to keep the lights on, food coming in. And a lot of people we know experienced that this past year. They lost jobs due to COVID. They got furloughed. They didn't have paychecks coming in for a certain period of time. And when you actually really tighten it down to just what are the core things that I need to survive, that's what your emergency fund should be. Now, if you're looking at, like Steven said, you're working for yourself, you're working piecework where, there's good times, there's bad times, you might want that fund to be a little bit bigger. But it's really up to you how big you want this fund to be. Our recommendation is about 3 to 6 months. You look at COVID, it kept people out of work for over a year.
Yeah.
There are some people who are still unemployed, who have not been able to return to the workforce yet. Not even some, millions of people who have not been able to return to the workforce yet. So, those family finances, if there was an emergency fund in place, and even if it was a 1-month emergency fund, that got eaten up very quickly. So we're not saying prepare for stock your bunker and prepare for a 10-year storm, but certainly make sure it's something that you are comfortable with, that allows you to sleep at night and you feel like, okay, bad stuff happens, or I have a terrible time at work. I fall out with my boss. I feel unsafe. I feel bullied. I feel harassed. That I can just say, you know what, screw this, I'm out. That's what we fondly refer to as FU money. I think that's a J.L. Collins term.
Is.
Freedom Unlimited money. All our under 18 fans out there. But yeah, that it also gives you the freedom to go do a lot of things when you have this kind of emergency fund in place. But emergency fund, it's for emergencies. So this is not for your vacation. It's not for your replacement car, even though I know sometimes that can feel like an emergency. But really, we know cars have a lifespan. We can start saving for that. And this is what we call a sinking fund. If you know there's a big expense coming up some point in the future, start putting a little bit of money aside for it now. And this is something that you get more able to do and you get better at doing as you go deeper into this personal finance journey. Like this year, my wife and I, for the first time, we started a sinking fund for the winter holidays. So every month we're now putting $50 aside to just say okay, when Christmas comes, so we celebrate Christmas. When Christmas comes, there will be a small pot of money to spend on Christmas so that we're not trying to suddenly come up with money. Same thing with our HOA bill. It's every year, same time of the year, $600, and it's actually in January, which is the worst time to have a HOA bill. But so yeah, we've just started putting $50 every month into an Ally Bank savings account, and then by the time the HOA bill comes around, we're like, cool, we can pay that easy.
Yeah. A lot of people will ask, should I pay off debt or should I start my emergency fund? And again, this goes back to, what is most important for you? What is the level at which you're at? If you have payday loans, I would say that's crisis. That's hair on fire. Gotta put out the emergency in terms of getting rid of that high interest debt. Anything that's over, 20% interest is hair on fire type of debt. But if you have something below that, right, do both. Do 25% into your emergency fund, do 75% against your debts, do 50-50, do 25 to emergency fund, 50 to your debts, and 25 to a little bit of investing, right? Like there is no right or wrong answer. Like at this point, you have gotten over the hump. If you're making these decisions, you've gotten over the hump of the hard part in terms of you have more money every month than you're spending, you're putting it away, and you are making your life better, your situation better. The other thing that I'll just touch on really quickly, and then we can move on, is there's a lot of different places you can keep your emergency fund, right? So do a little bit of research, go into ChooseFI.com. We won't go into these or explain these, right? But like some people keep it in a high yield savings account online. Some people keep it in their Roth, right? They consider their Roth savings. So there's a few different places you can put it. Some people create kind of a CD ladder. Just go and think about where is the best place for you and your family to keep that emergency fund. And there's some great resources online to go figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, an emergency fund needs to be accessible. It needs to be low risk. So the value still needs to be there when you need it, because you know that the moment you need it is when the stock market will be crashing, as happened with last year. So, the stock market got cut by 30% in the space of a month. And that was the exact same time that many people lost their jobs. So if your emergency fund was in the stock market, the money that maybe you thought you had 30,000, well, now it's 20,000. And now is when I need it. So I have to pull it out at that lower rate when I've taken a loss. Versus, an emergency fund that is in cash, it's in a savings account. Those are places where your emergency fund should probably live. And as you get a larger emergency fund, your finances become, I guess I'm going to call it higher level. You start leveling up in terms of your personal finance knowledge. That's maybe when you start venturing out into like, what are some alternative ways I can do this emergency fund? I would also look at how secure your job is or how secure you think it is. So like as Steven said, like a government employee, like it should be pretty secure. I was a high school teacher. I am a high school teacher. I did not lose my job over COVID, which I'm extremely grateful for. So I'm considering my job to be pretty natural disaster proof at the moment, at least, which is good. So our emergency fund is something that we're still funding alongside our investing because we feel like we've got a bit of job security.
2 great episodes are 295 and 303 of the ChooseFI podcast. They go into all kinds of emergency fund information there. And it's an interesting conversation about that.
Which ones?
295 and 303. And the way that you can find those, you can always find those by going to ChooseFI.com/ and then the number.
And I got them both coming up on screen for you. So 295 and then episode 303, both addressing emergency funds and creative ways to think about those. Yeah. All right, let's carry on our journey. For anyone who's just joining us, welcome. My name is Rob Phelan. I'm with ChooseFI Foundation, and this is Stephen Heptick, who is also with ChooseFI Foundation. And we are working this summer to bring you a series of summer webinars that will be happening every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Come join us live, ask your questions. We'll try and answer them as best we can. The replays, someone was asking about the replays. The replay will be available on whatever platform you're watching on. So if you are on Facebook, as soon as we stop recording, this will turn into a replay video. If you're on YouTube, same thing. If you're on your LinkedIn, should happen as well. This is the first time we've recorded on LinkedIn, so I'm curious to see how that goes. But let's move on. We are going into step 7. Yes. All right. So plan your savings roadmap. Okay. A little bit generic again. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the course, and again, the course is free. You can find it at ChooseFI.com/FI101. We have a PDF, and it basically lays out all the different options. So you've gotten past the crisis fund, right? You've gotten past getting your employer match, the free money. You are working on paying down your debts. You're working down, paying into your emergency fund. So now the question is what do I do to create savings? Where do I put money for retirement? And this just lays out all the different options, right? And the theme here is there's plenty of different places to save your money. So you can put more money into your employer retirement, which is going to be things like 401k, 403b, 457, and TSP. And when I say TSP, I mean the Thrifty Savings Plan, which is the government savings plan. So those are your standard ones. You also have a few self-employed options if you're self-employed, and you can dig into those, what those are. You have things like the HSA, the Health Savings Account. So if you've never heard of somebody referring to the Health Savings Account as one of the best retirement tools, Google that. There are some fantastic articles out there about the triple power of the Health Savings Account. and why it is a great place to save for retirement. But the point is, you also have things like 529s for your kid's college and just a regular brokerage account. And what I mean by that is just a regular taxable non-retirement. You can put your money in anytime, take your money out anytime, pay the taxes to the government, kind of an account that is you can purchase stocks, you can purchase bonds, whatever investments you want to purchase in there, right? So the point is here is lay it out, have a plan. The people that are the most successful at getting to their goals have a plan and stick to that plan, right? And so we have this PDF. You can find the PDF in the course. It's totally free. And we basically say, okay, yep, how much money do you want to put in your employee retirement plan, right? How much money do you have total to save right now? How much money do you want to put in your employee retirement plan? How much money do you want to put in the 529 for your kids? And you basically just keep going down the list until you get to $0 extra dollars. And you have a plan for every dollar and where it's going to go. And then you can take that plan, you can go and you can automate it. You can tell your employer to send it automatically to your retirement plan. You can automatically make transfers out of your accounts into your 529s, into your investments. And then you don't have to think about it anymore. You are on the road to success without even having to worry about it on a month-to-month basis.
Yeah, and that's it. It's your order of operations, and there is no one size fits all. And we're not here to tell you that there is. There are certainly arguments to be made for which one you should do first, which one should be funded at which level. If you have kids that are going to college, there might be different considerations versus if you don't have kids at all, or if you're saving for your own college. Like there's so many different nuances, and we'll try and address some of those throughout this summer webinar series. We're going to have a lot of expert guests coming on. So unlike last summer, where it was mostly Stephen and I ranting for an hour, we're going to try and bring in some people who actually know what they're talking about, and they can tell us a little bit more. All right, Stephen, let's go next. So after our roadmap, we go to evaluate our insurance needs. So insurance, again, this is not something that waits until the end. This is something that is happening alongside steps 5, 6, 7, and now 8. So it's almost like if we were really drawing this diagram, it kind of would have gone like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then just would have like splintered out into all these other steps that we want to think about. So insurance questions probably are, what types of insurance do we need? And what levels of coverage do we need? What would you add to that?
Yeah, the first thing is you need to think about insurance as a financial tool. It is part of your retirement plan. And the reason is because insurance, we want to insure ourselves against the big events, right? We're not insuring ourselves against the small things, the things that we can cover with our emergency fund, with our crisis fund. We want to make sure that having something happen to our car while we're driving, or our health, or anything else that could be covered, our house, right, doesn't take us to a place where we can't recover. And so there are catastrophic things that can happen, and you should insure against them. So that's really what this is talking about. It's a whole thought process of, what do I need? What coverage do I need on my vehicle? What coverage do I need for my house? And kind of understanding how that works. So there's a little bit of research that you can do to figure out, like, how is an insurance plan created? What is the most expensive part of an insurance plan? And usually the cheapest part of an insurance plan is the actual insurance part of it, right? The coverage, the liability coverage of, if something happens, what are they going to pay out to cover that? And so the idea is it's something that if you're thinking about getting your financial house in order, your insurance, and making sure that you are covered for all the major things while you're building your net worth, is part of that plan. It's an important piece. It's a critical piece of having that plan. Another one that I didn't mention too is life insurance, right? So once you get married, you start having kids and a family, like being able to know that your family is covered if something were ever to happen to you, or to you and your spouse, right? Like those kinds of things. And something else that we pair in the course with this lesson is also legacy planning, right? And so it's the things that are like not necessarily fun to talk about, but are really important. So having your wills set up, having your durable power of attorneys, right? Like the things that you don't want to be thinking about when you've already had a bad day. These are the things you want to think about ahead of time. And there's some really interesting resources actually in that lesson that talk about being able to create a binder. So it's not all the boring stuff like filling out a will and that kind of thing. It's things like If something ever happened to you, whether that's something to your health and you were incapacitated, or you were just, for some reason, like in my case, I was removed from the situation. I ended up in another country for work and I wasn't able to contact my wife. Like, is there a place that my wife knows where all of our account passwords are, where all of our insurance documents are, those kinds of things. So a little bit of that housekeeping admin.
I mean, when you think about insurance is you are covering yourself against the risk of financial ruin, and you're doing that by paying somebody else to take on the risk for you. So as you build more wealth, you actually will probably find that you will need less and less insurance in some cases. So like you will be able to self-insure more of your own life. You won't need insurance to cover 100% of what goes wrong. You're like, oh, I can take on 8,000, 10,000 because I have a really well-funded emergency fund. So I can pay lower premiums. Insurance sucks because it's one of those things that you pay for it. And if you don't use it, you think it's a big waste of money. And if you do use it, well, you just have to use your insurance, which also equally sucks. So yeah, it's not a fun topic to really talk about. It's not the sexy part of personal finance, but it is one of the most important because disaster, lumpiness, whatever we want to call it, is probably going to hit you at some point, and insurance will really help us weather that storm. Mandy asks, how often should we reevaluate our, I guess our insurance, but maybe also our financial plan?
Yeah, this is a great question, and you should look at your plan, annually. And so I've heard of some people, and my wife and I started doing this as well. And I have to admit, this was not my idea. I took it from somebody else, of having an annual getaway. We pick a weekend and we book something fun, right? Like we take either a staycation or a small mini vacation, and we do something fun, and we take our financial plan with us and we talk about it. We just have some conversations about how this past year go. What do we expect for the next year? Let's think about some of the things that we should look at. Mandy's question might be getting more at insurance. You should shop your insurance. Take the 30 minutes or so. Look at Policy Genius. Look at Lemonade. Look at some of these marketplaces where they can compare insurance quickly, because the insurance company is hoping, they are counting on the fact that you are too lazy to check, right? Like they are increasing your policy amounts every single year by just a little bit. It's like throwing that frog in the boiling water, right? Like they don't quite realize that it's increasing just a little bit every year until you look back and you say, wow, that is way more expensive now than it used to be. And so to that point, yeah, shop it around every single year.
Yeah. And just take a look. Most times, like you might already have the best insurance, and it's just a case of let's just have a quick check. Let's do, these sites like Steve mentioned, Policy Genius, Lemonade. Those are brokers that are looking out to see like what are the best deals out there, and let's see if we can find you something better. You're also welcome to just call up 3 insurance companies. So say like your car insurance, be like, all right, I'm going to call up Geico, I'm going to call up Allstate, I'm going to call up USAA, whatever your 3 are, and just say like, this is what I'm currently paying. Can you do better? Or like with that, or either give me better coverage, or can you give me a better price, and let them fight for your business. And that goes for most of your insurance. I would say life insurance is probably the one you can't reevaluate as often. I'm not sure about that. Is that a thing? Like, so like we have maybe a 20-year term policy. Like, I don't know if we can reevaluate our term life insurance like 6 years into the policy without starting a new one, which at this point, then the numbers have changed for the risk profile.
Yeah, I think so. That is a good question.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and find an answer for that one. And I know I just asked my own question and tried to answer my own question, but I think that's something that would be worth digging into. Particularly, I think insurance is a topic that we should dive into at some point. But we're almost at the top of the hour. Actually, we just hit the top of the hour, but let's get through steps 9 and 10, and then we'll move it on. So step 9, gotta get rid of Andy. There we go. Plan for college. So this again assumes that college is something that you have to think about. Same thing with insurance. Stephen gave an example of married with kids. The moment you have any sort of dependence is probably when insurance starts becoming a thing. So if someone is dependent upon your income or would go into financial hardship as a result of your death, that's when life insurance becomes a thing. So it doesn't have to be married with kids. And certainly college, same thing. A lot of people I know, they don't have kids themselves, but they are interested in the education of their nephews, of their grandchildren. Grandchildren imply you had kids, but you kind of get what I'm saying, like that you can look outside of your own family for thinking about college as well. All right. So what would you say for preparing for college?
I think the subline on this one is really important. Unfortunately, college, trade school, and certifications just isn't a short line that's easy for the title there. So we say plan for college, but really this whole section is about two things. One, planning for your families, whatever that equates to, right? Their income boosting education, and that can be college, trade school, certifications. Think about the ROI, and we like to talk about at ChooseFI that like the ROI on college may not be there. It may be more beneficial if you have somebody who does a year or 18 months or even 2 years of trade school, and they get out and they start making a really good trade income while somebody else is going to college and then is having to pay off the student loans for the college. It's actually very hard for that in that scenario for the college educated person to catch up with the head start that somebody gets being able to make income, a year or 2 years straight out of high school. So it's really interesting. It's just something that we like to really put front and center and say, think about the ROI, think about planning for whether it's a 529 or straight out of your investments. And you just lump all your investments together, or there's some really creative things we've heard on the podcast. Like the golf scholarship is always my favorite one, where at a certain place, if you are a golf caddy for some number of years, you can compete for full college tuition.
Yeah,
I
very,
always thought
very
that
like
was,
niche one. Yeah.
yeah, very niche, right? But just thinking about what it is that you want to do, what increases your income potential, how are you going to pay for it, and how does it pay you back over time? How quickly are you able to recoup that?
And that's kind of what I wanted to go back to is this acronym ROI stands for return on investment. What are you putting in compared to what you are getting out? So like with a lot of degrees, the current cost of college, we're seeing people pay more for college than they are going to earn back in a reasonable amount of time. I'll take education as a prime example. If you go to a local private college or any private college and you pay 40 grand a year for a teaching degree, that's only going to pay you $36,000 for a first year teaching salary. You're overpaying for the education and training, and you're not going to make enough money back to make that a worthwhile investment of your time and your money. And we apply return on investment to a lot of things, like how you apply your time, how you spend your time, and how you spend your money as well. So yeah, Chad put in the comments, like pipe fitters, welders, skills tradesmen have some of the best ROI. It's short to get trained, like compared to some college degrees, and the salary is very good for a lot of these trades, and especially because there is a shortage of tradespeople at the moment. So they're commanding better salaries, better prices for jobs because there's more or less competition, I should say, in that space. So yeah, like we talk about talent stacking and building up different skills and skills that you can acquire without a ton of training or without a lot of money up front. And I think, oh my gosh, what's the CRM one that we do? Salesforce. Like ChooseFI, Jonathan is really big into this Salesforce training that he's helped put together. And that's what, a 10-week commitment. You get trained on how to run Salesforce, which is a consumer relations management software. And that's commanding like a $60,000 a year salary, like after that training. So like a 10-week certification for a $60,000 career, there's a very positive return on investment for at least your money. Now, in terms of life energy and like your happiness, who knows? But there's certainly something to think about adding that into the equation.
Yeah. Something else that we talk about is, this isn't just college, right? Like if you're 30, 35, 40, 50 years old and you're thinking, all right, well, I'm past college, don't have to worry about it. No, we talked about the talent stack. What skills can you go get now to increase whatever income potential you have, right? And there are an amazing amount of online courses now from universities that are putting information out for free, or you can go, pay $500 and take a course from wherever, the Wharton Business School or somewhere else, and get a certificate at the end of it and take it back to your employer. Don't do that just for the fun of it, unless you want to do it for the fun of it and know that you're spending the money for that. But if you have the ability to go out and spend, a little bit of money, get an extra certification, take it back to your employer and say, like, this makes me more valuable to you. I should command a higher salary, and you're able to do some of that negotiations. That's some of the other things to consider. Like we said before, this whole thing is a very simple equation. It is, what are you making minus what are you spending equals the extra, and how are you investing that at the end, right? So you can change any of those three pieces of that equation. So we spent a lot of time talking about decreasing expenses, saving some money, not spending more than you make. But you also, like we said at the very beginning, you can increase your income, find ways that are good ROIs to increase that income, and you get more money out the other side of that equation of having extra money at the end of the month to invest and put into savings. It grows faster, gets you to retirement and financial independence sooner.
Yeah, and just kind of go back to that college point again. I mean, you have accounts that you can save for college. You can have different strategies in terms of scholarships. You can think more creatively about the type of degree you're going for, what college you're going for. Are you going to do 2 years of community college and then a 4-year state school? Can you find different part-time jobs that will partially, pay for college training? There's a lot of stuff that goes into college, and I think that's something that we will probably tackle in a future webinar episode at some point, or a separate video, because it's a great topic, and there are lots of great conversations about it on ChooseFI as well. So if you are not a podcast listener, or you're just discovering ChooseFI for the first time, if you go to ChooseFI.com and use their search bar, type in something like college, and you will see the articles, the podcast episodes, the YouTube videos that are there to kind of help you think about this whole college thing a little bit differently. All right, Stephen, we got one more step left. We've gone over the hour. Our goal is to not do that. So we're going to try and keep our talks within an hour, but we definitely want to complete the 10-step plan.
We're rusty on this first one.
Yeah, we're figuring it out. We had to introduce ourselves. All right, so write down your investment plan. We've already kind of talked about this already, but go on ahead, take it away.
So this is saying once you've gotten to this point, you have a plan, but it is easy to get distracted. It is hard to follow a simple plan for a long time, right? Like the thing about finances is that there is no correlation to higher education and more effort coming out with better results, right? I think it was Fidelity or one of the large houses that did a study across all of their different customers, and the people that did the best over a 50-year period were the people that died and forgot about their accounts, right? And so the point is that write down why you're putting money where you are, why you came up with that plan, what your plan is. And so we sometimes call this an investor policy statement. So saying that, hey, like I believe, an example for myself, the one that I've written for myself is, I believe in low cost index funds, putting money away every month and building a little bit of rental portfolio. Like those are the things that me and my family are going after. And whenever I, see Dogecoin or I see something else that is interesting to me, it's a good reminder to say like, no, that's not. That doesn't fit within my investor policy statement. Or if I maybe need to change my investor policy statement, there's thought that goes into that, right? Yes. It's just a way for you to write down and think about what is it that gets me to my goal on a consistent, repeatable basis. And it is always good to have your plan written down. That's why when you build goals, they tell you, write them down.
And you could even tackle this step in step 2. Like you could just say like, okay, this is the plan, this is the goal, and this is how I'm going to get to it. And I'm going to stick to this when times get tough. And this is really when it kind of pops up, is when times are really great and things like Bitcoin are, skyrocketing, and you're starting to feel this FOMO, like, am I missing out? Am I not doing the right thing? And also when the stock market's like the floor has fallen out from underneath it and it's dropped 30%. Your investor policy statement is the reminder to you like, okay, this is the plan. We knew stuff like this would happen. This is what I said I would do when something like this happens. And if you're doing this at the beginning of your financial journey, it could be when new money comes in. So I have unexpected money pop in from gifts or a bonus. Here's where it goes. We talked earlier about like the different investing buckets, like which one you're going to do first. That's in your investor policy statement as well. Like when I have money coming in, I'm going to fund my Roth IRA first, then my 403b, then maybe I'll try and find like my brokerage account rather than going the other way around. Because I know for me, it's very tempting to be like, well, I want to buy the individual stocks. I want to do that because that's really fun and exciting. And I have to check myself and be like, no, you haven't funded your Roth IRA yet. You haven't added to your 403b. That's not what's the next step. And for me, it's nice to have that reminder. And cryptocurrency, as you said, was something that kind of turned my head. I was like, ooh, this is interesting. and it's important to reevaluate. Does that have a place in your investor policy statement? Is there something that you want to add in? And you just reevaluate. You rewrite your investor policy statements to say, okay, this is something that I do want to include as part of my portfolio and my wealth building strategy. But you don't act on impulse. You go back to it, you check it, and you decide with a calm head, is that something that I need to change or not? And ideally, if you have a spouse or a partner or someone who is involved, they are part of that conversation too.
Yeah, this is one good way to think about this is there's typically one of us, if you're in a relationship with a spouse, there's typically one of you that is more interested in this than the other, right? You've got the nerds like Rob and I doing this. And I know for me, like my wife, she is fully on board with this plan, right? But she doesn't care. She just wants it to be automated and then go about her life. If it takes more than 5 minutes any given month, then that's more than she wants to give to it. And so I like to think of the investor policy statement of like, if I got hit by a bus, she would know exactly what to do, right? Like she doesn't have to change anything. She would pull that out and she would go, this is what we were doing. I will just continue with that. And that will get me 50 years down the road to, the plan of where I need to be.
Yeah. And then Johnny, you asked the question about like, should I include 2 to 5% in riskier investments? It's up to you. That's totally up to you. I personally, 90% of my money is in US based. And I say my money, our money is in 90% is in US based index funds. So like the total US stock market, an ESG US stock market fund, and then the total international. So like that's where 95% actually probably right now of our money is currently sitting. And then there is 5% that in my investor policy statement, it says, yeah, you can go for riskier investments in that if you want. That's your play money that you basically have to be okay with saying, if it goes to zero, it's not going to break our finances. It's not going to derail our path to FI. If it goes great, it might accelerate it. If it goes poorly, it slows it down a little bit, but neither is going to really dramatically change your path is what I would say. And of course, the more income you have, the different that equation gets. Like if you're talking about a $30,000 a year salary versus a 300, then maybe like there is more money to put into these riskier investments because you've covered your bases a lot easier.
Yeah, this is a great example. This is exactly what we're talking about, right? Like put in your investor policy statement, hey, 5% of my portfolio is for, what I might think are emerging investments or something that is unsure, kind of unproven, because then you can look back and you can say, I want to put money in, the distributed blockchain, cryptocurrency. I want to figure out a way to invest in that. And you can look at that investor policy statement and you say, great, 5%. What is my number right now? Is my portfolio at? I can take 5% of that as long as, it's not in something else risky, right? Like that's a great way to approach it. That keeps you consistent, even if the investments in that small chunk aren't consistent.
Yes, I think and it's also a great point to end on tonight. All right, Stephen, we covered a lot of stuff tonight. We had 10 steps in our blueprint to financial independence. If you look back in the comments section of whatever platform you're watching on, you will see the full blueprint. It's a PDF file. It's linked through a Google Drive folder. You will be able to find that and see all 10 steps again in one single document. That's something you can very easily print out, pin up on your like motivation board or on your fridge or wherever it is that you put stuff like that. If you want something that just kind of keeps you on track. We had a printable cash flow tracker that's also in the comments. And if you have any other documents that you feel like are worth sharing, please put them in the comments, add them in there. ChooseFI is a crowdsourcing podcast. Again, it's what we believe in, that there is somebody out there who knows more than we do about pretty much every topic under the sun. And there's more than one way to do these things. So please do share and freely share because we love hearing about that. All right. Any final words of wisdom, Stephen?
No, what do we have coming up next week?
Next week, we are going to be talking about, so we're going to shift gears into the parenting world, and we're going to talk about raising kids to be responsible money managers. So how to help your kids develop better money habits. This is a topic very near and dear to my own heart because I'm working on a children's book right now. And obviously I teach personal finance. So yeah, working with kids and building up their financial literacy skills is really important and a really big topic. Even adults who don't have kids, you can probably learn a lot from it, particularly just helping the kids in your life, whether it's nieces, nephews, grandchildren, neighbors, kids, you want to work in a school or volunteer at a public library. These are all things that you can do to help your community or help your immediate family out. That will be at 8 p.m. on Tuesday next week, and you'll be able to find it in the exact same spot you found this video. So that is ChooseFI's Facebook and YouTube channels, ChooseFI Foundation Facebook, and then on LinkedIn as well. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. And Stephen, cheers for being here tonight.
All right. Cheers. See you next week.